So this video is for anybody interested in auditioning for the 2019 drumline or front ensemble for the Victoria East High School Band. There are 4 audition pieces that I'll be going over with you. Keep in mind that auditions are going to be on the week of May the 6th, so you've got kind of a timeline to prepare these things. So I'm going to play the excerpts all for you, and then I'm going to talk about some tips and techniques that you may use to help you prepare. And good luck to everybody who's auditioning. All right, let's talk about this snare drum audition. First and foremost, you're going to want to practice this whole piece all the time with a metronome. Regardless of what tempo you start at, you need to practice this with a metronome because there's just a lot of metric modulations in there. 3s, 4s, 5s, 2s, all on a beat, and you need to be able to get cleanly between those two without losing tempo. So going in, measures 2 and 3, and also 16, 17, and actually measure 14 and 15 also too. These are hemiola figures. They don't always line up on the beat. It's a rhythmic pattern, but it's not always on the beat. So for your feet, you're gonna actually, one thing that might help is to actually go in and write in where your feet are gonna be within that rhythm so that you know, and that when you're practicing it slowly, you know for sure, you don't have to guess about where your feet are gonna be. That'll help that if you actually write your feet into the music almost like a separate part. It'll be a lot easier to play those things. Measure 5 and 6 can be tricky. That's going to require some practice. You've got all these paradiddle rudiments in here. Basically, the idea is to play these 16th notes without making a big difference in the sound, with the exception of the accents, regardless of what your sticking is. So there's a lot of doubles in here, a lot of paradiddle rudiments, and so it's really important that you practice slow and have the kind of stick control and the accent control that you need to be able to play those 16th notes cleanly regardless of what sticking you're using. And that'll be especially important for the next several measures when we start adding in dynamics to that. So the rhythm is always clean regardless of what dynamic we're playing at. Okay, let's see what else. Measure 13. These triplet rolls, if you look back at measure 11 where the last dynamic marking is, we're at 9 inches and 3 inches here. So that's 9 inches for the accent, 3 inches for the taps. Be careful that you don't try to play these rolls too high. It's going to be, these are fast rolls at the tempo it's written. So even at 140, you might be pushing 150 or 160 by the time you're ready to play for the audition. But even at 140, these are pretty fast rolls. And if you're trying to play them too high, it's going to make it really, really difficult on you. So play the accents at 9 inches. Everything else, keep it way down low. Really make an effort to play these diddles as low as you can at 3 inches so that you can keep this in tempo. Practice it with the skeleton rhythm a little bit, and then put the diddles in maybe one at a time. But whatever you need to do, make sure that these triplet rolls are in tempo. Okay, let's talk about the tenor audition. As somebody who's never marched tenors before, I can tell you about a couple of things that challenged me. Looking at this real quick, measures 2 and 3 practice staying relaxed. I've always said there's 3 areas in percussion that'll get you, besides your wrists and your hands and your fingers, which are obvious. There's 3 places on your body that tension will get you. One is your shoulders, another is your chest, and the last is your rear end. And tenors really present a lot of unique challenges when it comes to that. Tenors and timpani really, because you're having to use your trunk so much to get around the instruments. So just be sure when you're playing those crosses and sweeps in measures 2 and 3 that tension is not getting you anywhere. And that you can still play everything nice and freely and take care of some of those stick control challenges that are in those measures as well. Measures 4 and 5 with these 16th note triplets, don't be afraid to use your fingers here. This is a finger section. Try to check your height difference from time to time between the right and left hand. Sometimes when you're practicing a section like this and you just can't get it to sound clean, a lot of times the culprit is a difference between your right and your left hand, or a difference in playing spot. So make it as smooth as you can by checking where exactly you're playing on the drum and how high each stick is coming up off the surface for each stroke, and make that just as smooth as you can. Give as much energy with your left as with your right, or vice versa if you're left-handed. Okay, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Rudimentally pretty challenging here. This is another stick control section. The dynamics are your friend here, because as you start moving around the drums independently, you have accents on those individual notes. But still kind of a challenge from a rudimental standpoint. One thing I might suggest is practicing this hand separate. So for example, at measure 6, I might just practice with the lead hand with a metronome. Let me just turn the metronome on here, and I'll kind of give you an example of what I'm talking about. So I might start at measure 6 with just the right hand. Again. And then I might do something kind of similar with the left hand in the next measure, measure 7. Of course, taking the diddles out, but I might do something like this with my left hand next. That's that. And practicing that skeleton like that hand separate, I think will be a big help to you. Then, of course, we can put the other hand back in and start doing some of the rudimental things between the 2 hands. And then finally, I'd say the last stage would be putting the diddles in. Watch your stick heights throughout all of this. There's some big dynamics, especially near the end, so make sure that we're playing those correctly. There's a lot of places in here where the stick heights, if you really pay attention to what's written, it's actually the dynamics are your friend here. So make sure you're staying very, very faithful to what's written on the page, and good luck. Okay, let's look at the bass audition piece. A couple of things to note about this. Kind of like with all the other ones, you have to practice this with a metronome. There's just no good way to do it without a metronome. There's some tricky timing areas with the feet where you're playing off the beat and your feet, of course, are still on the beat. There's a lot of metric modulations in here, switching between triplets, 16th notes, 8th notes, all needs to happen seamlessly. So really important that the metronome work is going on with this one. We've got some diddles throughout here. At this tempo, really, in just about any diddles that you're going to be playing on bass drum, it's going to be a combination between bounce and finger. So if I just try to bounce it, it's going to have that sort of crushed sound just because naturally the bass drum with a bass drum mallet on it doesn't have as much bounce as, say, a snare or a tenor would. So you can't just use bounce and you can't just use your finger or your wrist because you won't be able to play it fast enough. So this is going to be a combo between using your fingers to help out with the diddles and also using the bounce of the drum. So practice this at tempo and get used to what that's going to feel like. It's definitely a feeling. Once you're kind of there, then you'll go, oh, okay, that's how that feels, and it's like riding a bike. But make sure that you can get there and you can play those diddles cleanly. Measures 5 through 8. These are some of our hemiola friends, and so this is a rhythmic pattern that doesn't line up with the beat. So what I would suggest doing is actually go through with a pencil or with a pen and actually circle the notes in the music. It's actually beamed together in a certain way to help you do this, but circle the notes where your feet are going to come down. That way you know exactly, almost like writing a separate part, where your feet fit into what your hands are doing, and practice those things with a metronome a lot. You may even want to practice this one without playing it, just singing it and marking time to it. Just turn on the metronome and count it and march it, and that'll probably help you a lot. Measure 3, we've got some offbeats. We've got these happening again in measure 6 and in measure 14, I guess. Let's see, are there any more? No, so 3, 6, and 14. We've got a lot of these offbeats here. This can start to swing if you're not careful with it. You got to get yourself to a point where this feels good. To march on the beat and play off the beat, you got to get yourself to a point where it feels good. So this might be something where you can just take those bars that I mentioned and loop them. Just do them over and over and over again, where it feels good to be playing off the beat, because so often, especially with younger players, this will turn into a swing rhythm between what you're doing and between the metronome, and can cause all kinds of problems if it doesn't feel good to you yet. So this is something to get used to if you're not yet used to it. So practice with a metronome, watch your stick heights and watch your accents and taps, and good luck playing the bass drum. Finally, let's talk about the mallet excerpt. This is a really fun little song, and it's got a couple little folk songs that I mixed together, and really fun thing to play. As always, definitely use a metronome when you're practicing this. There's 2 kind of real danger spots that a metronome will bail you out of, or at least help you overcome if you're using it properly, if you're using it every time you practice. One is the lengths of rolls, the lengths of the long notes. Very difficult to calibrate those if you're not using a metronome when you practice, to actually figure out when to release the roll and play the note after it. So be sure that you're using a metronome for that. That'll help you play those rolls in time so that they're not too long or too short, causing the tempo to move around. The other thing is, too, watch out for your dynamics. A lot of times when we go down a dynamic level, for example, we have a mezzo piano in here, we have a pianissimo in here, the tempo sometimes can slow down when we get to lower dynamic levels, and that shouldn't happen. So if you're playing with a metronome all the time, you're going to be well prepared to deal with that. So use a metronome for all of this. There's also a couple of funny rhythm things in here too, some 16 notes that are off the beat and things like that that you'll want to be aware exactly how they fit into the beat, even though you're not marking time. Let's see, what else do we have here? Measure 16. This E major scale can be tricky. It's got a crescendo on it too, and then we roll at the top of it. So it's kind of a difficult little corner there. A couple different ways to go about it. I would suggest one of 2 different stickings. If you're going to do regular, one is straight sticking, obviously, just like when we play our scale studies, but I would suggest at this tempo, if you're going to do straight sticking, if you're going to start with the left, that you use the edge of the bar on the marimba or the xylophone, either one. If you're trying to go to the middle, that's a lot of tying yourself in knots, trying to get back and forth between the black notes and the white notes, and so you can use the edge. Just be sure that you're using the edge, not over the string, so that you still got that good sound quality. The other sticking that if you're really wanting to go to the center of the bar, which I prefer that for sure. It's not always possible, but with the E major scale and also with the A flat major scale, there's kind of a secret sticking that you can do. And it's basically a double stroke roll. So you play the 2 black notes together as a double, and then the 2 white notes as a double, and the 2 next black notes as a double, and then you've got a single here. So you can play the scale this way also, and double stroke it. That's kind of nice to do with the crescendo also. So anyway, you'll have a decision to make there, but Either way works, just be sure that you commit to whichever way you're going to do it, just so that you're not trying to reinvent the wheel every time you get to that part and you have to figure out how to stick it. Now there are some sticking challenges throughout this. For example, really the first two measures I think are kind of a challenge from a sticking perspective, so be sure that you're working out. There's a lot of moving black to white, black to white, black to white in this first couple of measures here. So be sure that you've got your sticking worked out in a way where it sounds good and feels good to play. You don't have to go to the edge of the bar here. There are ways that you can work the sticking out to where you can play everything in the center, but be very precise about how you work out your sticking there in the first couple of bars, especially, because that's a tricky little spot. On these rolls, think even and smooth, not fast. It would be nice to be able to play all of our rolls at 1,000,000 miles an hour, but really what's important is that you sustain the sound. It doesn't have to be as fast as you can possibly play, especially if that's going to make it uneven. So the goal is to sustain the sound. So we want smooth and even, not necessarily fast. It's not supposed to be a rhythm. So roll in a way that really communicates that just the rhythm that you're playing. You're playing one note. It's an attack and a sustain is the only thing that a roll is supposed to do. So don't feel like you need to play a certain number of notes before that rhythm is finished. So think smooth and controlled and sustain when you play your rolls, not necessarily fast. Okay, and I think that's about it for this one, and good luck with the mallets.